Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Guthrie, and I'm here to chair this session on rebel leadership, the challenge to achieve real change. On my way here, I saw an advert on the Underground put up by the World Wildlife Fund for the Earth Hour on the 30th of March, which is very commendable. The bad news is that they've asked for everybody to make a pledge on that day. And the example that they gave of a pledge was that you can turn your washing temperature on your washing machine down to 30 degrees. The scale of the challenge that we face is completely out of step with the scale and pace of change that we think is necessary. An old friend and colleague who's now died, David Mackay at Cambridge, said, "If everyone does a little, it will amount to little change." Unless we embrace radical change, we will fail to meet the climate change targets that we've set ourselves. For 2 or 3 decades, our leaders have shied away from radical change. The government in this country has a pitiful record of good ideas which then fail to come to fruition. Carbon reduction commitment, Green Deal are only 2 examples of many others. So we now look not to our leaders who've had their opportunity, but to rebels and radicals and disruptors to make a difference. This session has brought together 4 people who put themselves forward in that category, and we're very fortunate to have all 4 of them here today. I'm not going to introduce them all at great length because I only know one of them personally, but our first speaker is Lowri Bond. Lowri.
Hello. Oh, it's quite loud. Thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you for inviting me here to offer some thoughts on the topic of rebel leadership. I accepted this invite in a flurry of excitement, and then I thought, I'm not completely sure what I know about rebel leadership, and in terms of sort of technical knowledge and understanding, I then thought, I'm not sure what I know about sustainability either. But then, in reading about the topic and thinking in a bit more depth, I realised that actually something that I do have a lot of experience of and hopefully some good understanding of is the process of change. And so that's what I want to offer some thoughts on today. I work for Igloo Regeneration. I'm a project manager based up in the northeast of England, and I'm fairly new to the organisation still, but my role is around placemaking and engaging with the communities in and around the places where our projects are being developed. I've come to Igloo from a fairly, I think, untypical route. My background is actually in the arts and working in the cultural sector and the charitable sector, and actually although latterly that was around placemaking and urban design, the majority of my working career has been working with marginalised communities, with people in places where the ability and the impetus to change can be quite low, can be quite dampened, and very often they are places where actually even just the most basic of changes to their environments are a struggle, and they're working very hard to overcome stigma and a need for purpose and for pride. And so when thinking about sustainability, for me, and certainly in relation to my experience, I think about the relationship between people and their places and then their futures. And so what I've got to offer is perhaps more sort of cultural in its nature. But I wanted to offer, and I hope this isn't kind of mean-spirited, perhaps inspired by the fact that it's World Book Day, but I'm actually just going to offer one thought, just one thought. But it is an important thought, because it's one that has been a thread throughout all of my work, everything that I've done, and keeps returning and keeps continuing to be of relevance when I'm thinking about change, how to help people through change or try to empower people to make changes for themselves. And that is a question, really. It is how, in our roles as professionals, how can we help to change the dominant narrative of places that are struggling to be sustainable, whether that's social, economic, or environmental. Because I think actually the narrative of places is one of the most fundamental keys to unlocking change. And very often the dominant narrative is not the narrative that unlocks that change. So I'm going to give one example. A few years ago, I was approached by a community organisation in Meadowell, which is in North Tyneside. And they approached me to work with a group of women who wanted to improve their neighbourhood. And the first thing that they explained to me was that if you Google Meadowell, you get page after page after page of results about the riots which happened in the early 1990s. Not only that, but the first entry that pops up is from the Urban Dictionary. And it is the most appallingly damaging description of their home that I think you could possibly conjure up. And they told me that their community is suffering because it can never get away from this narrative. It can never escape from its history of the riots, and that in successive generations struggle to overcome that dominant narrative. And they said, what we want to be able for people to Google Meadowell and for something positive to pop up. Now, unfortunately, in the intervening years, that hasn't changed very much. But if you do an image search, what they did manage to do was to set up a series of beautifully simple, sustainable projects, looking at skills development for their young people, looking at more inspiring stories around their heritage, setting up, turning wasteland into food growing areas. And so now if you image search Meadowell, they have succeeded to pepper the images of burning buildings, burnt out cars, police in the streets, broken windows, with lush gardens, with images of communities coming together to enjoy each other's company, to play, to enjoy the sunshine, and actually things that probably most of us take for granted, but that for them has been a really massive step change. A step change for them, but also a step change for the way they feel they are perceived. And it's that has managed to unlock a sense of possibility that has led to further change. And so that is the thought I wanted to offer. When I was working with this community, it was actually around the time that the organisation I worked for was mentored by Professor Stephen Moore, who's at Austin University, and at the time he was writing the book Alternative Routes to the Sustainable City. And when he came and worked with us, one of the things that he suggested that we paid more conscious attention to was the success that we were having in our work around shifting narratives and around changing dominant narratives of place. And in his book, one of his case studies is Curitiba, which is sort of, cited as having made such significant strides towards being a sustainable city. And one of the things that they have succeeded, and in fact, Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org movement, when he visited, noted, he said, "I met very few cynics. The resigned weariness of Westerners about government, which leaves only fanatics and hustlers running for office, has lifted from this place." And I think that's what I would really, really like to do, is to lift some of that weariness from some of the places that I have experience of working in. Because I think without that shift of narrative, shift of identity, we really, really struggle to get out of cycles of no change. And then once you start thinking about the power that narratives have in influencing change, you start to see it everywhere. So I was listening to Grayson Perry, who is a fantastic rebel leader. I was listening to Grayson Perry talking on the Beyond Today podcast about the shortcomings of the liberal elite. And he cited the referendum result on their focusing on the facts rather than the narrative. Not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but his point was quite salient in that he says the other side won because they knew it wasn't about facts, it was about how people feel. And so I don't know if storytelling is an act of rebellion in any way, but I think it's certainly worth thinking about in relation to change and in relation to leadership. And I encourage you all to think about how you use narratives and stories in your own work in relation to some of the changes that I know we'd all like to be influencing. And my favourite and most inspirational recent example, of course, comes from Greta Thunberg, pushing the narrative away from targets and incentives to "I want you to panic." And that is all from me.
Thank you very much, Lowri. That's a great opener. And now we're going to hear from Ben Smith of ARUP, who's also a trustee at National Park City. Ben. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as has already been said, my name is Ben Smith. I'm a director at ARUP, consulting in energy and climate change, and I'm also a trustee of the National Park City Foundation. National Park City is, I think, quite a radical type of project, and so I think most of my presentation today I will focus on that, which I think is why I've been invited to join this panel on rebel leadership. Certainly we're going to need a lot of rebels to help us deliver on the vision that we've set. So that's me. And I thought I'd just start by saying that in my day job as a consultant, I travel the world helping city governments to write strategies around how they can respond to climate change, how they can increase urban resilience, how they can develop low-carbon energy strategies, and so on. And I've been very fortunate in that respect that I've been to 10, 12 different cities and supported them in this endeavour. But I must confess to every now and then having a real moment where I think, is this really making any difference? Is this stuff actually going to be delivered? Am I actually just part of the problem here, not really helping much with the solution? And so in 2014, I was actively looking for something that I could engage in on a voluntary basis in my home city and which my children could see as a sort of hedge bet against my day job, which I'm not always sure delivers positive impact. On a good day, of course, I think it does. But there are moments when I question, is this stuff that we're thinking about really going to happen, and how quickly? So it's about that time that I got involved with the National Park City. And I think in that context, I think leadership is going to have to come from different places in the future. And Greta was already mentioned, but I think AOC as a freshman congresswoman is doing a good job as well. There are places where you don't expect leadership on this agenda to come from, but it's definitely having an impact. And the people around them who have formal leadership roles are having to respond to that. So in 2014, having just returned from working in Australia for a few years, I had a good fortune in meeting this guy, Daniel Raven Ellison, who, to be honest with you, inspires me. He's an explorer, and his story is that he walked east to west across every city in the UK and east to west across all 15 of the UK's national parks. And as he did that, a lot of it with his own son, he asked the question, why are cities not celebrated anywhere within the UK national park family? It's a bit strange when you think about it, because most of us live in them, and actually many city habitats are actually really ecologically diverse. Quite quickly he realized that you can't declare a city as a national park. Legislation precludes that, and anyway, it would be pretty disrespectful to the existing national park family that are out there. But he just altered the question. He said, okay, why not just coin a phrase, national park city? All cities are looking to kind of green their urban fabric, so perhaps this is something that can take off. Daniel's now a good friend, and I just want to take a few minutes to tell you about the story that we've been on together since 2014. That was about the time the National Park City idea was born in London. And it had really these three very simple aims. We just want to make London greener, healthier, and wilder. Start with, we were asking, what if? What would this look like for a city? Very quickly, as we got more and more support, we were starting to change that to, well, just why not? In 2015, what we did as first was we created a newspaper proposal. We wanted to get it out across London to try and build support for this idea. We printed it. We went ward to ward across the 600 and odd wards that exist in London, trying to get local political support to this idea, to those three core aims. And I have to say, there's not much they could disagree with. It was very easy to get that support. The campaign built in momentum. We ran lots of events as well. We filled the Royal Festival Hill. We filled the South Bank Centre and Conway Hall several times over, all the time building support. We won the support of the majority of the London Assembly, and eventually we won the support of London's mayor as well. And he and his team at the GLA have now taken some of our thinking and put that right across the suite of strategic policy that exists in London. It's prominent in the environment strategy, it exists in the London plan, it's in the food strategy, it's in the culture strategy. And at the same time that we were getting that business and that government support, we were also getting support from business. We have now over 200 businesses as part of our informal network, as well as lots of small communities doing fantastic projects all over London through Friends of Parks groups, Ramblers groups, and so on. Pretty quickly, and before we've really even established the National Park City, and before many of Londoners, I think 1 in 10 Londoners knows about this idea at the moment. We want to obviously get that number a lot higher, but before we've even managed to do that, before we've really got it established in London, we started to have calls from other cities around the world saying, we think this is amazing and we want to do it in our city. Adelaide, Melbourne, Galway, Glasgow are now all trying to basically follow suit and do the same thing. We realized quickly that we were going to have to do something to share the knowledge of our process, and we set up a charitable foundation called the National Park City Foundation. And someone recently from IUCN set a challenge for us to achieve 25 of these national park cities by the year 2025. So just to come back to London for a moment, London will officially announce itself as being a national park city in the summer of this year, in July, as part of a series of a week or a few weeks long of events as a part of what's going to be called a National Park City Festival. We did a dry run for that last year, and we had over 300 events happening all across London, really well geographically spread and with different types of engagement from different types of groups. And we hope that number will significantly improve through this year. We're raising money through a crowdfunder at the moment, which closes tomorrow, to print another round of newspapers to spread the word to more Londoners, to help them get involved. Because this is an idea that is really a seed of an idea, but until everybody engages it and understands the vision and understands how they can contribute to it, it's not really going to be able to be delivered in the way that we imagine. So look, I'm pretty proud of where we've got so far. We've managed to get this embedded into a lot of London policy, and we've got quite a lot of reach in terms of media, and people are generally, increasingly aware of this idea and this vision. And we've done that with no money, with just a few volunteers going around doing talks like this, as well as locally all across London. But we are also very aware that we've raised expectations, and we now need to deliver on that vision. And so at the moment we're in a phase of kind of understanding who might we partner with to deliver what projects, what outcomes might they deliver, how might those outcomes be monitored, and how can we look back in a few years' time and say, actually, this idea was grassroots up, has delivered impact, and for all these different groups across London, and London is greener, more people are getting outside and connecting with nature, and actually there are parts of London that are now wilder. So, am I out of time already?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, that's fine. Just to say that for this audience, which is, as I understand it, sort of very much development sector focused audience, we've had a really, really fantastic support from the people within this sector. This is a vision for Fleet Street created by the architect, urban designers Watt G. We've had design competitions where we've had a huge uptake right across from architecture's practices, but also through student architects, universities and academics and so on. These couple of entries that were some of the shortlisted ones from that. It ran last year. The one with the app there is an entry from the Farrell's practice. Canary Wharf, so we've had support from lots of different companies. Canary Wharf gave us space to host a workshop for the development sector, specifically trying to build a developers alliance around the National Park City. We had over 50 people, all those organisations joined us, and we were very much trying to zero in on what are the actual tangible projects that we can collaborate to deliver in London. And out of that workshop there came quite a few ideas, and we are now working to try to make those ideas come to life. Some of them being mapping projects using GIS, some of them being much more physical and tangible, like creating a National Park City Centre in the centre of London. So this session today was all about leadership. I'm pretty much out of time, but just to say a few things from my perspective, being involved in this project for the last 5 years, it is very difficult to hold down a full-time job while trying to build momentum around something which is in and of itself gaining momentum, and where requests and demands on time are just ever increasing, and that has been a challenge. You do need to kind of get comfortable asking for help. We do need to kind of crowd in more support to kind of make the vision become a reality. It is sometimes really weird when someone knows you for one thing and then you go to talk to them about something completely different. They look at you like, I don't want to know, but I don't want to talk about that right now. Like, go away and leave me alone. So I've been having a lot of very, very strange looks from 5 years or so now from people who know me as a consultant, and I turn up with this idea and this thing, guy's absolutely barking mad. So, you know, I've had to kind of get used to that, and I've had to try and use that for fuel to carry on. And so, but you know, at this point, I'm so committed that I can't let it go. And I hope that a few years' time, we'll be able to stand up and actually show you some of the things that this vision has catalyzed as real projects, and where we can show you the outcomes have been delivered that we were aiming for. I'm going to stop by saying my employers, both current and past, have turned a blind eye to me doing this. I'm very grateful to them for that. Thank you.
Super job. Well, if that isn't an example of leadership from not in a traditional position, I don't know what is. And it is quite interesting to reflect on how long would it have taken the Mayor of London to make that happen had it been his idea, and leading it from the top with an institutional dead weight behind him. It's a very interesting example. The third speaker is the only speaker that I've known for some time. Kirsten Henson has been an inspiration to me since she came to Cambridge some years ago as a student on the MPhil course for Engineering for Sustainable Development, and here is a genuine rebel leader. Kirsten.
Give me a lot to follow there, Peter. Thank you, Peter, for the very kind introduction, and the inspiration, I think, is reflected right back at Professor Peter Guthrie. He is the reason why I am an engineer today, and proud to call myself an engineer.
It's not true.
When we think of rebels, I think we often think of the Gilets jaunes or perhaps the Tottenham riots. We focus on physical conflict and the destruction of public property. Indeed, we often think of rebellion as a negative term. Rebels are to be outlawed by society. But over my 15-year career, I've learned that being called a rebel is a compliment. I consider rebellion to be a positive force for change, a courage to be different and to challenge the status quo. I never managed, or perhaps I never gave the time to understand how I could rebel in a large consultancy, one with procedures and rules to be followed, one with strict hierarchies, As one who refused to play the game, I always felt purposely overlooked, too difficult for promotion, which led me to set up my own consultancy almost 10 years ago. I was too outspoken to succeed elsewhere, and in the last 10 years, I'm proud to say that I've had about 15 young rebels move through my business and move on to be rebel change agents elsewhere. Now, at KLH, we've been really fortunate to work with clients that have a global conscience, but I've recently been so frustrated by the unwillingness to rock the boat, a reluctance to open dialogue with clients about how the brief or vision that they have is driving an unsustainable design solution, a frustration with planning authorities that only know how to follow the rule book rather than genuinely engaging developers who want to deliver something different. Take the recent recipient of the Sterling Prize and the 2019 BRIAM Award, the Bloomberg offices in London. A building purported to be the most expensive office building ever constructed, with an excessively opulent interior and a domineering heavyweight exterior. One has to challenge how this building can justifiably win awards that have sustainability at their core. If the judges can't challenge the architecture for what it is, what hope do we genuinely have? It has LEDs throughout. Hurrah for LEDs! But 500,000 of them? It's got light diffusing ceilings that provide acoustic attenuation and form part of the low energy cooling strategy. Made of 2.5 million polished aluminium leaves. External gills that help soften the traffic noise. Wonderful! But made from 600 tons of Japanese bronze. Now, the last time I checked, copper, there was about 40 years worth of economically mineable copper available to us. And I can't help thinking that perhaps we should be putting that copper to better use in the world than creating 600 tons of Japanese bronze leaves. I mean, probably best to ignore the 10,000 tons of imported Indian granite as well. This is greenwashing at its best. We've recently had an experience with an architect who offered a building that met the client's brief, but with a horribly inefficient form factor and facade design. And given it's in London, we had an open location. What a gift in central London to have a site that is open and available to play with. And suddenly in this site, we had a rather arbitrary and inefficient 14-metre grid spacing to deliver the open plan office working required by the client. Now, the client has targets to reduce the embodied energy of their buildings by 15% against the baseline design. I made the mistake of putting up my hand and suggesting that perhaps by starting with an inefficient baseline, we were rather missing the point. This may not be a discussion that we will win, but we will continue to have it, and we do hope to make the client and the architect think twice before putting pen to paper the next time around. Now, let's not fool ourselves that it's only the architects that aren't engaging in this climate challenge that we have. We have another client whose ambition is to deliver 100% affordable homes for rent in London, and quickly. 3,000 homes in 5 years. I say chapeau to that developer for having that vision and that mission. And I'm not talking about affordability that's 80% below market rate, because as you all know, in London that is simply not affordable to the masses. This developer wants to deliver 40% affordable to rent against that 80% below market value, but 60% at affordability as defined by the local borough, bearing in mind the incomes, the job creation opportunities and availability of employment in their boroughs. So I must be very pleased. I must be very happy. But we failed at almost the first hurdle. Incidentally, it's worth noting that we're not delivering affordability at a cost of quality. We are aiming to get home quality mark for all of these buildings as well, all of the homes as well. It's a heavily constrained site. The first site to come forward is right outside Osterley Station, so a highway on one side and you've got the railway on another. We also obviously want to be cognizant of the historic Osterley Underground Station, so we're quite restricted in how many stories that we can build, and given the residential nature of the properties around there. We had to take the design to the GLA. In order to deliver on that constraining site, the developer said, to deliver my vision of affordability, I can only deliver 1 and 2 bedroom homes to make this financially viable. The GLA turned around, despite the screaming need for affordable housing and well-connected central London locations, and this site not being particularly well suited to 3-bedroom family homes anyway because of its location. The GLA could not find within them a rebel that is willing to break the rules and deliver something different. Their advice to my client was to cut the number of affordable properties within that development such that they could deliver some 3-bedroom properties. And that I find particularly galling, where we can all point around developments across London that through a small payment to local authorities have actually shirked their responsibilities for delivering affordable housing in our city. The developer is now softening their stance, their mission statement on their website, because they're being restricted by the GLA's non-negotiable stance. So it's goodbye to 3,000 affordable for rent homes, hello to 1,800 affordable for rent homes, and 1,200 never get on the housing ladder homes for rent instead. Another example from a planning authority, we've got a small developer this time, who came to us and said, Kirsten, I want to deliver net carbon zero homes. And I said, well, what do you mean by that, Ben? He said, I don't know, but I think it might be fun to try. So our first stage was to develop net zero carbon, and we're talking full life cycle, embodied carbon, operational carbon, end-of-life carbon. We worked with an incredible architecture and engineering practice to change their design. We did things like change the orientation of the roof so that we had maximum south-facing. We got the form factor changed so that we had better energy performance and energy efficiency. Changing of the facade solution so it's a lower embodied carbon, changing of the interior layout so that we could use softwood timber struts rather than internal steels. Fantastic design team to work with. It then went to a pre-planning application. The local authority, the designers there loved it. The planners said, I'm sorry, you're encroaching on the 4-metre leeway that you have to have with against the existing homes, and we don't really like the timber cladding because, you know, everywhere else is brick, so we kind of want you to do brick. Now that small encroachment actually was part of a wider strategy to deliver 15% improvement on energy performance. These are not decisions that are just an architectural whim. These are decisions that were made to try and truly change the way that we are delivering homes. Zero carbon homes, not as the rubbish that the government give us, where we can offset 65% through payments that never get spent and are never audited around zero carbon, but truly zero carbon on-site homes. Everywhere I turn, we really seem to be lacking good rebels at all levels in society. The worst boss I ever had, I have to say, sat behind a desk on the largest and most exciting construction programme that London has ever seen, and I know there's some friends from that programme in the audience. He had a great reputation in sustainability when he came to our team, and we were very excited to have him. But he seemed to believe that he could lead disruptive change from behind a desk, never putting on hard hat and boots and going out in the trenches to speak to those tolling away in the blistering heat and the freezing snow. I've heard since a rumour that the powers that be specifically selected him as a spineless leader so that the sustainability commitments could be shirked. Now, unfortunately, the powers that be hadn't bargained on the fact that they had a small team of young and fierce and ambitious sustainability rebels that believed in a better way of doing things, and we succeeded on that job. So even when rebels do appear, we find a distinct lack of leadership, support within our management structures. That lack of support can really crush the hardiest of us all, I think. Even my own mother, when I set up my own business, I started my own business in the deepest point of the recession in July 2010, asked me whether I wouldn't be better off taking that job with Balfour Beatty. She is one of my greatest supporters, it does have to be said. So I find myself, I'm being told I must finish, I find myself more and more frustrated by the lack of change in our industry, the prevalence of sustainability consultants hamstrung to telling a good story rather than an honest story, hiding behind BREEAM rating instead of delivering truly sustainable building design. I think as the deadline to prevent climate collapse draws ever closer, the need for rebels has never been stronger. We need people who are willing to take a risk and to try something different, people prepared to call out a client, a designer, a product supplier on greenwashing. I did that here today, yesterday, calling out some of these product suppliers, challenging them. What's the end of life of your product? How does that compare in embodied carbon to traditional build solution? I was tolerated, politely, but not one of them asked me for a business card so that we could continue the conversation to explore how this wonderful sustainable building products that we see out here can actually improve and deliver a truly sustainable future. We still have a long way to go.
I suppose that's the trouble with rebels, they never stick to time. But our final speaker is Omer Kutluoglu, and he's the director for Yes Recycling. Omer.
Okay, right. There we go. Thank you, Peter. So, I'm not really from the building industry at all. So, I spend half my time working in innovation, the other half working in plastics recycling, and pretty much most of that time in the crossover between the two. I'm here because principally Kirsten invited me to come here, and the thought of standing up in a room full of a few hundred people I've never met before and saying something was probably less scary than saying no to Kirsten. So here I am. The truth of it is, I first came here actually about 10 years ago launching a product that we developed called EcoSheet, and that product was to take low-grade waste plastic and turn it directly into a substitute for plywood. That product we took about 5 years, launch, build, to develop the market. At some point, we ran out of money and our VCs pulled out. So we actually then closed that company, sold the factory to an American group, and made an application to the EU for a large amount of money, which at the fourth time of asking we managed to get. And our EcoSheet Generation 2 factory has just finished being built. I look forward to unleashing that on the world in the coming months. Why do I tell you all of this? And I'm going to come back to that. As Peter said, we do live in worrisome times. Political failings, I think, are gross. I think there are some great political leaders around. You think about China bringing 750 million people out of poverty. It's astonishing. You compare that probably with what's going on in the White House and think, oh my God. You look a little bit closer to home and probably think, oh my God as well. In any case, political failing, radicalization, nationalism. I heard the other day on the radio someone saying, it's a long time since we've had a war in this neck of the woods, and people forget what nationalism does. Growing nationalism, falling international trade, also worrying. So you look at all that and it's a worrying landscape. And of course, even bigger, the biggest one of all, really, so big that it's easy for most people to forget about it on a day-to-day basis, the environmental threat. What's happening, at an accelerating pace to our planet and what we're doing every day to that. It's terrifying. So you look at it and it paints a bleak picture. What I want to say is that there are solutions out there. And here's where I'd like to say the rebel leader comes in. And this is what we do. So first, let's start with a little definition. How would I was thinking about it, rebel leader, what is that? And I came to the conclusion that actually the rebel leader, reaching back in my literary repertoire of great works that I read, I found it. And it's the small boy in the emperor's new clothes. It's when all around you have accepted a normality and stopped looking and just said, yes, that's the way it is. And all questioning has gone. And yet somebody, however small, puts their hand up and go, but he's naked. And his mum's giving him a clap on the back of the head, going, shh, and his dad's kicking him, don't do that. And he's going, but he's naked. That's your original first rebel leader. Because actually, that's all it takes. It takes people to look at it and go, there's a better way of doing this. So circling back to our case for our product eco sheet, here's one model: chop down trees in Brazil, make them into sheets, laminates, fill them with toxic formaldehyde resin, ship them 5,000 miles to here at a rate of 100 million sheets a year, wait 18 months till they all start to fall to bits, and then toss them in a landfill where they leach their toxic formaldehyde into the floor, into the ground, and start all over again. Tell me, anybody, does that seem like a great model? Just anyone, put your hand up, say, that's fantastic. Yet 100 million sheets every year into this country alone. So you look at it and you say, that doesn't work. That makes no sense at all. So we look at it and we say, well, what can we do about it? Well, the truth of it is, every single one of you sat here working on the assumption that you're sitting here because you're interested, not just exhausted from walking around, but working on that assumption, every single one of you has the capacity in this day and age to be a rebel leader. We have never lived in such dangerous times. We have never lived in such powerful times. I don't think democracy is everybody voting on issues they have no idea about. I think democracy is the ability for everybody's voice to be heard and make a difference. Where I sit in the plastics industry, you should see what's going on. The corporates are running scared. They have no idea, capability, or even understanding of the ferocity, force, and speed with which public opinion turns against them. Yes. And it's whipped up in a frenzy like that through the internet, where suddenly thousands of people can come together in a tsunami of opinion that sweeps all before it. I was talking with my niece the other day. She's at Glasgow University, and we were talking about plastics, and she was saying her and her friends, if they walk into a cafe and they see they've got plastic straws, they all turn around, walk out. How cool is that? And so every single one of these youngsters who's taking actions like that, it doesn't have to be standing at the gates of Buckingham Palace with pitchforks. You've all got mobile phones, you've all got feet. You can choose, you can share opinion. And from where we sit, particularly in the plastics industry, the corporates are running scared. They are running scared. And I would say to everyone here that you listen to some of the things going on in the world and you think, gosh, it's so terrifying, it's so frightening, it's so big. oh, it's too big for me. It isn't. It starts with tiny steps. And where Peter started about saying a lot of people doing little things, actually, I am the hugest proponent of doing little things. True rebel leadership is in every single one of you. It's about looking, questioning everything that you see, and where you see stuff, look and see, question it and challenge it and put your opinion out there and see if you can coalesce other opinion around it. There are infinite examples everywhere you look of things that if you look at them questioning, you would say, that makes no sense. And I would invite you, as my only real thought today, to do two things, is remember to question things that you see. Be active about that, mentally active about that. Don't be intellectually lazy. Look at things and question. And the second thing is don't be afraid to put that opinion out there, because believe you me, and I'm seeing it every day in the plastics industry, believe you me, every single little voice, tweeting, texting, whatever, is like a sledgehammer into the walls of the corporate bastions that are propagating this thing. So that's all. That's my 2 pence worth, and thank you all. Sorry.
Thank you, Omer. And from that quartet of presentations, I can't believe that there aren't questions and contributions from the floor. There's one over there, and I've no idea where the microphones are. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. It's right behind you. Can you tell us who you are and keep your questions short?
Okay, my name is Sam Robinson. I'm a student at the Centre for Alternative Technology MSc course. Yes, just on the point of things that make no sense. Just as there are plenty of things at this exhibition. I'm not going to name any of them because that's a bit unfair. That make no sense, but I just want to draw the attention to the fact that it's light outside, and we are sitting in a metal box with no access to the sunlight, and it's entirely lit by lights, and that's my point.
Round of applause.
Thank you.
Love that.
Have we got another, even something amounting to a question? Yes, there's one right over here, just to exercise the microphone to the maximum. It's coming to you now. And if you could tell us who you are and what your question is.
Thank you. My name is Marlene Armfield. It's not so much a question, it's a comment that I think could interest everybody. My mum bought a plastic cup between 60 and 70 years ago. It's still in perfectly good condition and I'm regularly using it. It's a squidgy cup, but if I can keep a cup going that long, what's all the rest of the stuff doing?
Right, who would like to take that one? We'll start with Omer.
Go on, you're the plastics man.
Oh, really? First of all, I commend you on keeping a plastic cup going for 70 years. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Plastic is a brilliant material. It's light, it's easy to work with, it's inexpensive. There's so much going for it. It lasts a long time. And the problem we've got ourselves into is more about how people use it than the product itself. And this lady is a beacon of common sense that actually hang on to your plastic cups, and who knows, 70 years from now, you may have it too.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice point. And, part of our problem is consumerism gone mad. We're always told we want something new, something bigger, something better, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then the product suppliers not taking responsibility for those items that are encouraging us to throw away. We were discussing sort of in the built environment, buildings, and the fact that everybody loves the Victorian terrace, and we built them out of solid materials, and you might say they're high embodied carbon, but they continue to last and people continue to live in them. That's great, a building that's there for 100 years, but we seem to have got into this society where we've decided after 30 years we're going to knock a perfectly serviceable building down, rather than think about strategic and intelligent and innovative ways that we can adapt and reuse and I guess rehabilitate our buildings or our products. And I think it requires a shift in our public consciousness about the way we consume, and it also requires a shift in the way that we view and walk through the world in which we find ourselves inhabiting at this present time.
Thank you. I mean, one good example of change of behaviour was the landfill tax. A long time ago, the inert waste was only charged at £2 a tonne initially, and overnight, the amount of inert waste going to landfill from the construction industry dropped by 50% in a single month. So you can change behaviour with really quite small levers. There's a question here.
Thank you. Alistair Mant from UK GBC. Just to say, firstly, thanks very much, all four of you, for getting up here. This is, I think, the best event I've seen at EcoBuild, certainly this year, or maybe for many years. It's really nice to see people just speaking with passion and authenticity and calling stuff out, because we are in a crisis, and it's nice that it's actually being addressed here today. So that's my first point. Secondly, how do we get more rebel leaders in the industry? How do we get the passion, the skills, the storytelling that we heard about? Who gets taught that as we become surveyors or planners or engineers? Or actually, do we need to hope that it's people from outside the industry or us all in our personal lives that makes the change happen?
I'd like to respond to that, because I think that one of the things that over the years I've done is a lot of working with young people, a lot of working in schools, and something that I've seen progressively, and certainly since I was in education, is a squeezing out of the opportunity for young people to fail. And by which I mean that with the pressure that the whole system has on achievement and attainment, and obviously particularly in relation to exam results, two things have happened. One is that allowing young people to be creative in their learning has been lost. And the knock-on result of that is that very often young people are absolutely terrified to fail. And you only produce the kinds of people who can go out into the world and challenge things and question things and find new ways of doing things if they have the confidence and the experience for it to go wrong, or for it, to understand what it means to try something that you don't know whether it's going to be right or not, and be absolutely fine with failing and getting up and doing it again and persevering and not being crippled by that experience of failure.
Ben, did you want to add to that on behalf of ARUP?
Yeah, sure. So I think something Kirsten said in her presentation sort of resonated with me, coming from the sector that I do, sort of working within a big corporate. I think, I do see people, concerned about it speaking out because it might affect them in terms of making getting the next jump up, getting a promotion, getting a pay rise. And I think we have to be honest, if you're coming into the workplace on a graduate salary, that probably is a big motivation for a lot of people. And certainly in the early part of my career, that was a motivation for me too. I think it's you get to a certain time in life where you've been doing it long enough and you kind of see things for what it is, and you're like, you know what, I don't care. Because you think, well, if they sack me, there's probably someone else who'll take me. I'm prepared to work quite hard. I want to try and deliver some change. But I think there's a definite point at which you, within yourself, sort of get to that point where you've got that confidence. You think, well, if I stop and do something different and it doesn't work out, and I can switch back over here and there'll be someone else who's willing to take me. I feel that a lot of people come into the workplace and they're on a trajectory. It's like they're in a professional silo and they're going in this direction and they're doing everything to try and get to the next stage. And to pick up an issue which is perhaps not core to that and be passionate about it and be rebellious and to get in people's faces, frankly, it might hold you back.
There's one more question. Oh, no, there's one question there, and then last one here. Oh, there's one there. No, you go. Okay. I've lost control. Where are we? Oh, yes. Okay, thank you.
No question, just a remark. Günther Jedliczka, ÖAD Wohnraumgesellschaft Wien, Vienna. What we do is, in fact, we build passive house student dorms for international students coming to Austria. That's our main job. What we also do is, we have 2 summer universities starting with climate change. One is about green building solutions, and the other one about alternative economic and monetary systems, because we think if we want to fight climate change, the only possibility is to change our monetary and financial system. I think that's a really crucial point. For example, positive or sovereign money is one topic, the economy for the common good as an example, alternative currencies and all this stuff. So if anyone is interested in that, come to the Austrian booth. I can give you further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over there.
Yeah, my name is Melissa Merriweather, and I run Green Consult Global. It's a sustainability consulting service. I think it's very interesting that everybody brings up the plastic straw situation, and I think plastic straws sort of inspired a lot of people, and it's great that they're concerned about it. But I get worried about the fact that the conversation gets shifted to things that are really tiny. And if people are concerned about plastic straws, they have to be concerned about baby wipes and Q-tips and all kinds of other stuff. Convenience meals, take away plastic food containers and so forth. And so, and my friends mention plastic straws all the time, but they don't talk about all this other stuff. So do you think we can inspire people to take a more holistic responsibility towards how they approach their consumer lives and their daily lives, so that it's not a tiny soundbite? Do we have to dumb down the conversation, or can a kind of rebel moment take hold where people say, I really care, and in the medium term, I can make these strategic changes? It's not going to mean that I've got to throw everything out, I've got to change everything, but a medium-term strategy that's reasonable instead of too small or too big.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the plastic straw thing, it's an easy, tangible illustration. I think the real change is driven by what's being offered. So if you go into a supermarket and everything's wrapped in plastic, you need to buy your food, you walk out with a load of plastic. If it isn't wrapped in plastic, you take your food home without plastic. It's simple as that. So, you know, a lot of it is to do with the models in which plastic ends up in consumers' hands, the expectation of quick use. And the truth of it is that the large bulk of that everyday consumerist plastic is coming into our houses through supermarkets. And the pressure on the supermarkets is forcing huge change in that arena. So whether they're panicking about moving away from black trays, which can't be recycled because our near-infrared sensors can't read it. So the way that this really works is consumers not just saying no to a straw, but actually saying no to the supermarkets, forcing opinion at the supermarkets. And the supermarkets are on the run, they are on the back foot, they are trying to shove change right the way back through their supply chain, and that's how it needs to be done. And that's why I genuinely think, and to answer this chap's question over here from before, how can you actually do something? I think the answer, very simple, practical thing, really, really simple, is to every day pick something. Pick something you see and spend 5 minutes looking at it on your phone and seeing, are there any other people who feel this way about it? And if you say, well, you know, why are my M&S apples in a plastic pack of 4? You know, get a text off, an email off to M&S saying, why are my apples in plastic of 4? And it doesn't matter that 8,000 people have already said this. It's just another email coming into their inbox, grinding them down. And you know, how long does that take you? 5 minutes. It's a practical thing to do. And I would urge you to take little steps like that every day, make it your mission, Monday to Friday even, call it 5 days, take 5 minutes to annoy someone with an email. Simple as that.
That's a great closing message. Almost every email does annoy anyway, so it's likely to be very successful. And actually, the plastic straws is quite an interesting example, because it may become the proxy for what the corporates then have to deliver through reputational risk, because they understand that next week it may be something else that becomes the cause célèbre, and so they have the means to respond in advance by protecting their reputation. I'm sorry we're out of time. I feel as though there could have been many more questions. Thank you very much for your close participation and your engagement, and please thank the speakers.